Hey pole dancer, welcome to the Evidence-Based Pole Podcast. My name is Rosie Boa. I'm a pole dancer, pole teacher, and personal trainer, and I've started this podcast so that we can learn together, talk with the experts, read the research, and feel better on and off the pole. So if that sounds like something you're interested in doing, let's go. All right, welcome everybody. I'm very excited for this episode. I'm joined by Neesh, who you may know from Instagram as Pole Savage. Really beautiful dancer, very strong. You may have seen her championship piece at Northeast, possibly online or in person, but also a physical therapist and a pole instructor at Pink Ambition, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So any of y'all are up in Harrisonburg in Virginia, definitely check them out. So let's get started. I just want to learn a little bit more about you, your pole journey, and then maybe a little bit about how your, physical therapist knowledge integrates with doing pole, but also teaching pole.
Yeah, for sure. So I have been polling since November 2019, and I have been a physical therapist since May 2019. So pretty much they go in line with each other. I've kind of been an athlete all of my life. And then I went to grad school, and then I stopped exercising as much because grad school is busy. And then, after grad school, kind of got a job, and I was on a travel assignment, and just really wanted to try pole. And then it happened that where I was had a pole studio. And then I started my pole journey in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and that's where the love started, and I got really hooked to it, as we all do, became pole obsessed. And so, I moved here to Virginia about 3.5 years ago and started going to Pink Ambition, and got engulfed in that. And really great studio for strength-based tricks and things like that. Very heavy on the tricks. I know every studio is different and what they have the specifics on, which is stuff I like though. And I became an instructor there January of 2022. Yeah, I was like, I think so. And so I've also been I'm a physical therapist. I work mostly in outpatient, but I do work in a rural area. So I work and I see a lot of different variety of patients. Orthopedics, I do see stroke patients. I see amputees. I see a variety of different patients. So I get exposed to a lot of things. However, I really love having the knowledge and bringing that to the studio in many different ways. Because there's just so much that goes into, I know pole is a great art, but it is also such a sport, and so much needs to go into what you're doing and knowing exactly what musculature you're working. What mechanics do you need to use to do this? There is a science to it. And that's the best thing that I love bringing to not only my classes, but other people as well in the pole community. What do we really need to be using, and what is important when we're doing all the things we're doing on the pole, outside of just, I can do this, What do you need to use? What does your body need? Energy. What energy do you need? What energy sources do you need? What food, what food do you need to be putting in your body? What musculature do you need? What do you need to do off of the pole to be able to do things on the pole? And I just think, a lot of people don't think about that part. And how do we rehab injuries? People in the pole world are going to get injured. Everyone has experienced an injury. It's hard to avoid in the long run because pole is so repetitive. You could try to, complete injury prevention, but in the long run, most people are at least going to get a small injury because it is a repetitive sport. So, in that aspect, there's just so much to go into it and so much to share. And I enjoy sharing that with the pole world because I think it's an area that can be more expanded on in the pole world and those things, so we can make sure everyone is safe in that way. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I like the more holistic view, right? That it's not just I'm going to show up to pole class, I'm going to, try and match the shape that I'm seeing, and that's the extent of what I'm trying to do, which hopefully most folks aren't doing that. I think probably some people have had that experience at least in some of their pole life, and hopefully at some point they move past it. There's a series that you did a while ago that was looking at different moves. It's very similar to how I think about pole moves, where you're what do these three things have in common? And it's the same muscle activation, the same biomechanics, the same overall structure of moving or not moving, right, or just supporting the joint in an active position, and I don't know where I was going with that. It was cool. Definitely go check out Pole Savage on Instagram if you haven't already.
Yeah. I like I said, I love that stuff, and really just breaking it down and getting to the nitty gritty of it. And I really want more people to get into the, it's not just showing up for class. Like, I realize that, pole is a hobby for a lot of people. Not everyone is pole obsessed. Like, that's why I like to say it. Not everyone is pole obsessed. It is just a hobby for some people. So they don't, it's easier to see it as like something I do in my spare time when I want to, interact with some type of exercise, which is great too. But also, like, I think because I come from a sports background, I'm like, it's also a sport. So you need to think about, what are you doing for your body off of the pole to make sure that you're healthy on the pole? Like, all these athletes, you got basketball players, you got football players, you have gymnasts. All of them do so many things outside of the sport that they do to make them the best that they can be at the sport that they do. And I just like to treat pole the same way. How can we make our art form, our sport, the best we can, while also putting us at the best ability that we can be without hurting ourselves, or making sure that we have the proper mechanics, or making sure that we have the proper amount of movement. All these things need to come together to make that, that perfect ball of, pole in general. What we show on the pole. There's so much that can go on off of the pole to make that happen. So
absolutely. I think I don't know, a concrete example that I like to use a lot is, if you want to be able to do splits up the pole, you really do have to be able to do them on the ground, because it's not easier once you're doing it on the pole. It's easier to do it off the pole and develop that, faculty.
Gravity, like all those, you're on this little cylindrical shape, and you're just expected to be able to hold a split upside down. If you can't hold it on the ground, it's going to be much harder, like you said.
Absolutely. So what are some things that you really, you recommend maybe to someone who is more recreational and they maybe aren't doing anything off the pole right now? What are some things you'd recommend? Hey, maybe try incorporating these into your training regimen overall.
Right, absolutely. I always have at least one strength-based day. Go to the gym. Even if you're not really a big gym person, or you don't like exercise that much, really, like, some people just don't like going to the gym. You can do it in your home too, but at least one day where you're like, I'm going to just pick these exercises, I'm going to do it. Even if it's push-ups, even if it's, you're doing some type of rowing activity, you're doing some squats, you're doing something that is strengthening you off of the pole, to get you better on the pole. And it doesn't have to be much. It's just about picking something, because I know it can be very overwhelming to think, what do I have to do? All you have to do is pick a couple things. If you start somewhere, at least you've started, and then you're conditioning your body to be ready to do what you need to do. And then, I always say, like, if you feel like you need help, reach out to someone who in the pole community, this is something that they love to do, so that they can help you. There's a multitude of different resources. That is something I'm trying to break into too, but like, there's a multitude of different resources to help you, guide you on that journey to at least get something started, even if it's just one day of 30 minutes. One day of 30 minutes is better than no days of 0 minutes, And also, base it off of what you like. There's all types of different ways to break into strength training, or, off the pole cross training. Base it off of what your goals are at that time. Pick 1 or 2 goals that you want to work on, and then work towards that, instead of being like, I need to do this. You say, well, I want to strengthen my pole muscles so I can pull myself up the pole. I want to improve my back flexibility so I can be back bendier. You have 2 goals that you can work on. And you just have 2 days outside of pole classes that you need to dedicate to that. Like, when you really break it down to that simple, if you just have those 2 goals at the time, at least you know that you just need to put 2 days of 30 minutes a day at least to that. And then I feel like that really helps people to just break it down. It's not as big and vast and as overcomplicated as it can seem, because it can be overwhelming. You just have to find those goals that you want and position yourself towards those goals and work towards them. And, if you need help, find someone that can help you. It makes the job much easier.
Absolutely. Yeah, especially like the examples that you gave of like a squat a row thing, so that could be using a rowing machine, or it could be like a weighted row, and then planks. Like those three things together, if you're looking to get better at climbing, you're going to get the core support and stability, you're going to get the butt muscles to lift yourself, and then you got the arms to like engage. So those are three great exercises to do together.
Simple things. It's simple things. We don't have to complicate it. You start somewhere and then you go from there. You go from there. So I agree. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So that's sort of more with your, sort of portal instructor hat on. If you wanted to like switch hats to more of your physical therapist hat, so you mentioned, if you keep doing stuff long enough, probably you're going to have some sort of injury, whether that's, that doesn't necessarily have to be traumatic injury, right? It could be an overuse injury. I know those are super common in pole dancers, but what are some things that you would recommend with an eye towards like, okay, let's try to make it like as best as we can, right? Let's try to avoid the issues to the degree that we can.
In terms of like when you get the injury or like before the injury?
Yeah, I'm thinking more prehab. So avoiding it in the first place. And then, yeah, also like once you get it, what do you do then? You just keep dancing on it forever, right?
Keep going. It'll go away magically. But so in terms of prehab, cross training, main thing, prepare your body for what you need to do. Cross training, whether that be working on, like I said, the strength, the flexibility, or the joint mobility. All those three things, they are very important things. If you're not strong enough to do something, other muscles will take a hold, and you probably will get injured because you're not using the main musculature. If you're not flexible enough, you're going to pull yourself in some type of position that your body is not prepared for. And if your joint mobility is not great enough, when you're trying to work these flexible moves, or even like just eccentric strength types of moves, if you don't have enough joint mobility, you're going to have to pull it from somewhere else. So like I said, if you don't have enough overhead mobility for an Aisha, you're going to pull that from somewhere else, whether that is trying to rotate through your mid-back, rotate through your mid-back, or extend around at your lumbar spine. You're going to have to find that from somewhere else to make up for what you don't have. So working on things, like I said, basing it on small goals, find the goals, see the issue, work on those issues so that you don't injure yourself in the future. Strength, flexibility, and joint mobility. All those three things to be able to get that nice concoction of what we want. I would say is the best to help with preventing injuries. And then also working both sides. Working both sides. Oh my gosh. And I keep talking this myself too more. Like, do the other side more. You don't need to be Popeye on one side and, have nothing on the other side, But work both sides, be even, because that is repetitive action. If you're always, this is always your upper arm in a half bracket, it's always going to be pulling, you're always going to be pulling from the same arm. So you're more, like injury prone if you're doing just the one side. And then, warming up, please warm up, people, warm up your body to do all of the things. We cannot go into an extreme sport that pole is. It's extreme. You do a lot of different things. You're throwing your body in different ways. Whether you're doing tricks up the pole, you're doing low flow, it is hard on your body no matter what. So warm up so you do not pull a muscle, you do not injure any soft tissue structures, any ligaments, any tendon. You don't want to. It's just a healing process that we can avoid. So warm up as much as possible. And then the last thing I would say that's super important is to listen to your body. If your body is telling you, you need to stop. If you're feeling, I feel like my shoulder has that little tiny bit of twinge, it's probably time to stop. Because that little twinge can turn into a big twinge very quickly. So, those would be my main things to say to avoid the injury when it comes to if you do get an injury. Depending on the severity of the injury, I will always say to someone, go see a medical professional. And if I'm going to say a medical professional, I'm going to say see a PT first. There's a lot of places, depending on your state to state, you can go direct access to a physical therapist. You do not need to go to a doctor or a PCP, a primary care physician, to see a physical therapist. The reason I say go directly to a PT is because it will make the process much faster for you, because we know, the medical system, there's a lot of different doors to get through. So you might be waiting some time to get to the doctor. So let's say you get injured this Saturday, and then you have to wait until Monday to call the doctor's office, set up an appointment, and then they don't have any openings for another 2 to 3 weeks. And then you have to wait 2 to 3 weeks to go to the doctor. And then you get to the doctor 3 weeks from now, and they say, okay, we'll set you up for physical therapy. And then you call the physical therapy office. If you're on time and you'd like to get things done, in 3 weeks you call the physical therapy office and they say, well, we don't have any openings for another 1 to 2 weeks. Now you're 5 weeks into the timeline of your injury where you might not have known what to do. So maybe you're just, you're staying away from your activity. You're not doing much because you feel injured. Even if it's not necessarily the best thing to do, with the different protocols now in terms of injury recovery, resting is not necessarily good. Icing is not necessarily good. So you're resting, you're staying away from your activity. You might be icing. And you're like, well, hopefully it gets better, and it doesn't get better. And then in that whole time, we have time that was wasted. That's you're staying away from your sport, what you want to do, instead of you getting on the ball rolling, helping that injury recover, and getting back to what you want to do. So instead of it being, if it was a small injury, 6 to 8 weeks, now we have a stall of 5 weeks plus the extra 6 to 8 weeks, because resting is not going to make the injury go away. It's not going to make it, some people, they might get lucky and it does, but it doesn't mean that the injury site is going to be healed properly, or the soft tissue that has been injured is not going to be at its 100% capacity just from resting it. We need to load it. There's so much more that needs to go into it in terms of the injury. So if you have an injury, go see a medical professional. If it's that type of injury, like obviously if it's like, I have a little twinge in my knee, but then I wake up in the morning, it feels better. But if you're like, this is something, I can barely extend my knee, it hurts, it's swollen, I can barely lift my shoulder without it hurting, go see somebody, because like I said, those more major injuries, although you might feel better after resting, there are some properties of that musculature, that soft tissue, that is not 100% capacity. Sometimes you lose mobility if it's a joint issue. You lose range of motion if it's there's so much that goes into it that you need to be able to recover, and you just resting it might not be the best thing altogether in the long term. In the temporary, you feel good. In the long term, it can turn into a repetitive injury, and we don't want repetitive injuries, because then it just takes you away from your what you want to do even more, and then you're just kind of in this cycle, because repetitive means that it's weaker. Yeah, I think that answers the question.
Yeah, I definitely think it does. And while we were talking, I was reminded of, because when I first did my pole teacher certification, like a while ago, 16 maybe. Anyway, folks were still teaching RICE, right? Those of you may have heard it, like RICE, rest, ice, compress, and elevate. Not recommended anymore. We've moved on, and I think it's like hope and love, care and hope.
Peace and love.
Peace and love. That's it. I was like, I don't remember the new acronym, so I don't know how helpful it was.
Something in that realm. Peace and love now. So yeah, there's just, and a big part of that is loading the tissue to help promote healing. And icing is not great because you're reducing the inflammatory process that needs to happen. So, there's just so much to it. And it's good to have people like on your side to help you that can guide you in there. It's what they do. It's their profession. So yeah, absolutely.
And who are also, keeping up with new evidence as it comes up. Like, I think, it's a challenge, right? That's part of the reason I started this podcast, is that it's hard to know when things change, when the research is like, actually, we shouldn't be doing that anymore. A lot of people who have their sort of dance knowledge from, let's say, the 80s, things have changed a lot since then. And we know a lot more, right? Like, we're not sitting around in static stretches as our full warm-up anymore. That's just not recommended based on the evidence.
I agree. Yeah, there is a lot. Everything is always changing. There's just so much to keep up with. So, and if also that to go off of that, if you go to your medical professional and you don't agree with what they say and your own evidence, then push against that. You should have, like, say you're going to a physical therapist and you don't agree with what they're saying, or you want more understanding of why they're doing what they're doing with you, or you don't think that they're up to the appropriate evidence-based research on what they're doing. Push the topic with them. Push your medical professionals to give you the care that you deserve. Do not settle for less than that. Obviously, I'm not saying be like, really rude or anything like that, but like, if you don't agree with something, let them know. Because if I was that person, I'm treating you, I want you to know, I want you to feel confident in what I'm doing and what we're doing together. You should always feel confident that they're telling you the best things. So if you don't feel confident that they're giving you the best care, let them know. Or if you still don't feel good, find somebody else. It's your body, so make sure that your body's getting the best care possible.
Absolutely. absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially, for those of us who are not lucky enough to have a PT who is also a pole dancer, folks may not be familiar with the demands that we're putting on our body, which, as you just pointed out, not within the normal range of what humans do day to day, right? Like even just like reaching your arm up overhead often is not a normal human movement pattern in, the Western industrialized countries. Like, I don't know, next time you're out and about, just like look around at people in a crowd and be like, how many people are going like this? Like a lot. It's not that common.
Not that common. And being where I work at in an orthopedic setting, most people don't have the normal 180 degrees of shoulder range of motion overhead for flexion that you would need to do in Asia. So like, most people are not working with these types of our type of field of athletes, because we are pushing the extremes. And when I say it is an extreme sport, because we're pushing extremes that normal people may not be pushing. Normal people are mostly not pushing. Even some of the traditional athletes are not pushing that, like, outside of, the gymnastics world, the dance world, but like, just like the more traditional athletes such as basketball and football, all those traditional sports that most physical therapists and medical professionals are more commonly seeing. Based on what I have seen, they're more commonly seeing those type of athletes rather than they're seeing more of the dancers and the like gymnasts. They're seeing more of those traditional type of athletes. So they're not even going to be able to understand some of the things that we have to do and how to incorporate the type of flexibility that we need to incorporate, the mobility, like all of these types of things, the range of motion that we need to be able to do. So like, let's say, challenge them on what they're telling you. If you feel like something's not enough, then say that. And if you need more help, there is a lot of different resources in the pole community. Obviously, I love when people message me and ask for help. And then, Dr. Jen Crane, she's
amazing.
Yeah, real PT. And then Dr. Emily Roosh, she's a pole chiro, and also there's a circus mobility doc, so she's also a PT. So there's just like so many different people in the pole community, and all of us really love that we got into this because we love to do it. So I would say that anyone would be open to, in that realm, to give you some advice. If you're working with someone, reach out to someone. If it says, they're a professional, reach out. And then the pole community, they're few and far. Reach out and get some help, because we understand your body and what in the world is going on there. So, best to talk to someone who knows what they're doing in both realms. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the circus doc, we have had on the podcast, so you can go back and listen to that episode. Although I think we mostly ended up talking about research.
But which is awesome.
Yes.
I love when people really enjoy research. It is not like my biggest strong point, I will say. Like, it's great to read and things like that, but like people who can just find the perfect, they're really good at researching. Oh my gosh, that is an art form.
It is a skill.
Yeah, it is skill, because articles don't just pop up at you. You have to know how to look for it. So yeah, pretty cool.
That actually reminds me. I'm going to be keeping an eye on this, and I'll probably share it if it does get published. But so for those of you who are familiar with pre-registration, this is the idea that when you're going to do an experiment, you say beforehand, like, this is what I'm looking for, and this is like the statistics I'm going to do. Because if you have a bunch of data and you keep doing statistics, you run into, basically, you're likely to find something that's not actually a real pattern. It's just an artifact, the fact that you looked at a bunch of different things a bunch of different ways. But someone has just pre-registered a pole dance study and looking at cross training, and specifically they were looking at Pilates versus weight training, I think. So I am really interested to see what they find on that. And I don't know if they were looking at strength, or there weren't like a whole bunch of details, right? They were just sort of like saying like, I'm going to work on this, and like, here's what my analysis is going to be. I'm not entirely sure if they were looking at strength or injury, but I'm personally really interested to see, because I do I mean, when I teach online, I can't know for sure that people are going to have, weights and stuff. So I do teach a lot of body weight, strength and conditioning. So I'm really interested to see the outcome of this particular research project. Sorry, that was a tangent. I was just reminded of it because we were talking about research.
Sure, that's going to be interesting too to see too. I'm very interested. I think Pilates is awesome. I have a friend that is a Pilates instructor who also is an instructor at the studio, and it is, mind blowing the types of things that you can get through Pilates, because the core, core strengthening that you get through Pilates is amazing. So
Yes.
I'm interested in a whole altogether.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
I think it's particularly relevant for us in pole because a lot of the core strengthening that you might see at a gym, sort of like very rectus focused, is not as helpful for us because we need stability in the air and not necessarily just to be able to like crunch and then I'm done. Like we need that a little bit, but we also need, just overall.
Hey, it's so important. Like that's where it comes in, that little like difference between like just traditional like gym programming and things like that, and like things specifically for pole dancers, because like you said, it's not just about being able to use your rectus to crunch, your stabilizers. Also, you need to be able to use your deeper core musculature, be able to control your pelvis. So power of the pelvis, legit, like there's so much power in the pelvis that we need to control, be able to do pole, just like inverts and Aisha, things that you need that tilt for. So like just like smaller things like that to control your pelvic mobility. This is why we say work with someone who knows what they're doing. It helps.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A little bit of a change from what we were just talking about. I know you are also a competitor and you perform. And I know also a lot of students and folks who are listening, that's a goal I've been hearing from a lot of folks this year. So I'm wondering, do you have any particular tips for people or things to think about when you're training for performance, or things to think about around that?
Yes. Okay. Performing is fun and it is also stressful. Like I just try to be honest, like coming from someone who has an anxiety disorder, it's stressful and it's like anxiety ridden, but like it's such an amazing experience at the same time. Like when you step off the stage, you're like, when you're about to step on the stage, like leading up, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so anxious. Oh my gosh, I've gone to the bathroom like a million times. But then you step off the stage and you're like, oh my gosh, I just did that. And now I want to do it again. It is a really weird feeling. You know what I mean? So I will say to people, if you want to compete, if you even have an inkling of feeling of competing, especially if you've never done it before, go with that inkling, because you will feel like you have accomplished something so amazing once you do it. Like it's just to know that you put together something and you stepped on the stage, you did the thing, and then you stepped off that stage. It puts you on a pole high. You know what I mean? Like it's just an amazing feeling to feel after you get off that stage. Here at a lot of competitions I've gone to, like people are very supportive of each other. People want to see you succeed. The pole community is filled with a lot of amazing people that really want you to do well. They support you. They're going to, really, tell you how much they enjoyed what you did and how much what you did inspired them. And you know what I mean? So you get that part of it too. And then for tips, or like in terms of like training, I'm very like particular about my training and starting early. And my timeline, I will say to people, you need at least 4 months before competition to be starting your training, even 5 months. So I started 5 months before most of my competitions. I try to start 5 months before. And that includes, figuring out what song you want to use, what type of energy you're trying to bring to the stage, what is the vibe of what you're trying to give off, what do you want people to feel when you are performing, like what are you trying to get people, like you want people off the stage to know exactly what you feel when you're on the stage, so that's a big thing to think of. I'm a big one of like, if I don't have a song, I don't know what I'm going to perform. The song, really first picking the song and then figuring out the vibe. And then as you go about that, then you can start, if you're really, take it early and start 5 minutes before, you can start brainstorming different things that that you like, that you want to put into your routine. And then after that, it's time to, if you can, work with a coach, a competition coach, if it's someone at your studio, someone outside of your studio that you really like, someone online. It is very helpful to work with somebody because 1, they keep you accountable. 2, they give you different ideas that you did not think about, and putting things together. They're going to see things from a different perspective because they're looking at you from their angle, and they can see how things can come together on the stage. And they can push you to do more than you think you're capable of doing. I mean, obviously safely, but like there's so much potential that you have that can be unlocked when you work with somebody else. And it takes some of the pressure off of you too, because like competition, it's a lot of preparation. It can, like I said, be stressful. So when you have someone that's kind of giving you that extra, feedback or helping you build the combos. It's less pressure on you to be like, I have to do everything on myself. No, you're complementing each other. You and your competition coach, you're bouncing ideas, and that's how, the magic kind of comes together when you're working with someone in that aspect. So that would definitely be what I would say. And then from like a injury prevention, things like that too, be mindful of what you are doing outside of competition training. You still obviously need to keep up with some type of cross training, but you don't want to be at the same level you would have been before you started competition training, because now you're putting your body into, like, the things you're doing in competition training are way more intense than you were doing in your regular training. You are pushing your body with these repetitive motions. You're doing your hardest moves over and over and over again. Your body needs time to recover after those types of trainings. So if you do cross train, you don't want to be at the level that you were before you started comp training. But you still want to keep up with that. Giving yourself enough energy. You need to eat, people. Eat enough energy to get through competition training. You're putting way more load on your body. Your body's going to need to recover from all these things that you're doing. So we need to eat to what is the word? You make up for that. We're just burning so much more energy, and we don't want to, put ourselves in a bad position. We want to make sure that we have enough energy, not only to comp train, but also to work our basic functions, and get through the day, so you're not like, why am I so dizzy at this time after comp training? We didn't eat enough. Trying to think of other things too. Make sure you sleep enough too. Make sure you sleep enough so you can recovery, and that's just for anybody at any time, in training, but especially during comp season, make sure you're recovering properly. I'd say so. Those are some big things to just think about, take away for the competition training. But like I said, don't be afraid of it. Lean into it. The nervousness that you feel, the uncertainty that you feel about it is normal to feel. Most people do, because it's something that is uncomfortable, that you're doing. You're putting yourself on a stage and you are putting something together that you sometimes feel vulnerable about, and you're letting everyone see that, and, it's stage fright, but know that when you step off of the stage, you're going to feel so accomplished in what you have done. You know what I mean? It is like I said, it is it's crazy. It's feeling how 2 seconds, 2, 3 minutes, 4 minutes ago, you were so nervous. And then you get on stage and you do it, and then you step off and you're like, oh my gosh, I did that. I dedicated the time to do this. I put the time in. I worked hard, and look at what my body can do. And bonus, a lot of times after you train for competition, you come out of competition training so much stronger, because remember, you were training your hardest moves at a high level. And all of a sudden, after you've rested after comp training, you come back to pole training and you realize you can do things that you could not do before you started comp training. So, yeah.
I do like the thing you brought up, that after you rest after comp training, because it's
don't go straight into it.
no, take some time. It's a lot of stress, right? And
hey.
You have one bucket of capacity, and it's not going to magically get bigger because you signed up for more stuff.
Right. I know a lot of people who are like, but I want to keep going, because you get off this pole high when you get off competition team. You're like, I need to try everything. It's allow your body to come down. You did just put yourself through a lot of stress for many, many weeks. Let's rest and then come back to it, So yeah, for sure.
I think those are all really fabulous tips and great for folks to keep in mind. And there's, obviously there's in-person pole competitions for folks who aren't doing stuff in person. There's virtual pole competitions. There's other, performance opportunities. If you're not, if you're someone who isn't drawn to competing, you can also perform in other ways. But yeah, I also really enjoy it. So if folks wanted to work with you, I don't know if you do competition coaching, but or if you do stuff online, but there was a little hint there that maybe there might be something coming. So if folks wanted to work with you or learn more or keep an eye on things, where can they do that?
Yeah, please go ahead and, if you want to follow me or give me a follow or send me a message on my page, Pole Savage. I'm not a big competition coach. I know that is not my strong point. However, I will be this year I'm starting my performance business and for the pole world, helping people with cross training. I dabble in it right now in my studio mostly, but I'm hoping to take it and to bring it to the whole pole world. So that will be coming soon in terms of Instagram and all that business stuff to provide cross training services and also PT services online to people in the pole community so that I can bring all of this knowledge that I want to share with others to the community. Because, you know, the more the merrier, the more education we have, the better. The more resources we have, the better. Because why not, you know? So yeah, but give me a follow or, you know, message me at Pole Savage, please, if you have any, like, I really like to help people. It is like a passion of mine. So just get, you know, send me a message, even if you don't know, you know, what's going on. If you want any type of advice, anything in that realm, cross training, physical therapy wise, injury prevention wise, anything, send me a message. And look out for my performance Instagram coming soon so that I can help you guys get better. Definitely within like the next like 2 to 3 months for sure.
Oh, that's exciting. We'll definitely keep an eye on that and give Pole Savage a follow, and I'll link it down below so folks can join really quick. So
thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much for coming, chatting. I had a really lovely time, and I'll see y'all who are listening later. Thanks so much for joining me today, Pole Dancer. This podcast is a production of Slink Through Strength, the inclusive, evidence-based online pole studio. So if you're looking for a place to train, either off-pole conditioning and flexibility, or learning pole tricks and refining your pole movement, you can find us online at slinkthroughstrength.com.